I was 12 years old. I was a short, fat little kid with really thick glasses. And my mom came in and said, you cannot sit in your room all day and eat and read books. You need to do something. But being poor really makes things difficult. And that year, somehow or other, she had squirreled away enough money to get a family membership to the YMCA. So she took me down there and she pushed me out of the car and said, join something. And I did not want to. But my ride had driven away. And back then, before Title IX, most sports didn't allow girls to join. So my three choices were track, which if you're a short, fat little girl, you don't run fast, and swimming, which if you're a fat little girl, you did not want to put on a swimsuit. The other thing was judo. The judo instructor had a sister, and I always think I should make up a good lie about I want to be a ninja or that, but no, the judo instructor had a sister, and so he allowed girls to join. And yeah, I was a fat little kid, so I was hard to lift up, and I was really short, so I was hard to get under, and I was from a very disorganized environment, let's just say that politely. So I was used to fighting, and yeah, I was good at it from the get-go. And when I was at school, when I beat up another kid, I got suspended, and at judo, I beat up another kid and they gave me a medal.
My name's Joel, and I'm a recovering nerd. I spent the last 25 years bouncing between creative jobs and technical teams. I worked at places like Nickelodeon to NASA, and a few other places that started with different letters. I was one of the first couple hundred people podcasting back in the early aughts until I accidentally became an IT analyst. Thankfully, someone in the government said, hey, you're a nerd that talks good, and that spun me off into the world of startups, branding, and marketing, for the same sort of researchers and startup founders that I used to hang out with. Today, I help technical people learn how to get noticed, get remembered, and get results. On Nerds That Talk Good, I want to help you do the same. I talk with some of the greatest technical communicators, facilitators, and thinkers that I know who are behind the big brands and the tech talk that just works. This is an episode that I am super excited about. It is with AnnMaria De Mars, who is a Judoku champion, tech founder, grandmother, just an all-around amazing person. Had a little bit of audio glitch in this one, but please just stick with it because there are some stories in here that you are not going to want to miss. So without further ado, let's go to the mat. This is going to be a real treat. The first official interview with someone with a real Wikipedia page, so we got a lot to talk about. Dr. AnnMaria De Mars is a judo champion, 4-time tech entrepreneur, an educator with a groundbreaking career. In 1984, she became the first American to win gold at the World Judo Championships. Beyond sports, she holds a PhD in educational psychology and has applied her expertise to technology and learning. As the founder of 7 Generation Games, she develops educational software focused on improving math literacy, particularly for Native American communities and underserved communities. In 2013, Forbes recognized her as one of the 40 women over 40 to watch. And then she was inducted into the International Sports Hall of Fame in 2016. So a true innovator. I'm very excited about this. She's also the mother of Ronda Rousey, who you know is an Olympic judo medalist, followed in footsteps, and Maria Burns-Ortiz, a sports journalist and co-founder at 7 Generation Games. So a whole sports tech family here. I'm excited. Thanks for joining.
Well, thanks for having me.
I always want to start off with the same question, which is your nerd origin story. Now, you can tell the jock to nerd origin story, maybe. We can get into that, but I would love to hear a little bit about your upbringing, your passions, and what led you to founding this company.
I always liked math. And I started programming with punched cards back when I was 15. I was a bad kid. When people say, oh, I'm sure you weren't that bad. Oh, no, I was the person your mother warned you about. So I was sent to an alternative school after getting in too much trouble in the regular high school. And they had an agreement with St. Louis University. We were an inner city school. And we could write programming statements, and then they would get one trustworthy student, who was not me, to go down to St. Louis University a few blocks away. They would type in our code in the key punch machine. Then 12 hours or a day or two later, depending on the traffic with the students, and that we would get a printout back, and we would have errors in it. So that was my start with programming. I remember one of the first things, I'm old, right? We were, I kid you not, our math teacher's alternative service to Vietnam. He was a conscientious objector, and so his alternative service was to teach us. And I'm sure there's days that he had regretted that decision. And one day he came in and he drew a picture of Mickey Mouse on the board and said, write the equations to teach a computer how to do this. So, of course, the circle, you would have the equation for a circle, and then you could have two eyes that could be circles, and then you could have two more little circles inside of that for the pupils, and then you could have two inverted parabolas on different sides for the ears with a negative on the x-axis and a positive, so they're on opposite sides. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. I think because I had so much trouble in a lot of other areas, like the state terminated my parents' parental rights and took us away, there's so many things there isn't an answer to, right? Like, what's the best way to raise kids? I have 4 kids, and they're all very successful. I have no idea, right? Or why does politics seem to be insane? And how do you get people in who actually care about the kid? I don't know. But what is the square root of 49? It's 7.
Right.
So I have always, I think, coming from a fairly chaotic background, really liked from the get-go, from being a little kid, things where you could have an answer and you could prove it was the right answer and nobody could tell you you were wrong.
So the math was pretty concrete, but then you got into some of the higher math, and I will admit I'm not a math person at all. We talked earlier, my son is gifted at math, could give a rip about it, but he asks these amazing questions and I'm like, dude, I have no idea. Let's go watch a YouTube video about it. And I get sucked in at how incredible it is. So it's concrete, but it's not just straightforward and rote. Once you get into some of those higher level mathematics, what drew you into the athleticism then and the judo? If you discovered math so early, they often say that brains and brawn don't mix, but you are not. You are the exception to that rule.
I was way into math before I got into judo. I was 12 years old. I was a fat little kid with really thick glasses. I was still living at home at the time. And my mom came in and said, you cannot sit in your room all day and eat and read books. You need to do something. And I think like a lot of families that have issues, my mom was not a bad person, but being poor really makes things difficult. And that year, somehow or other, she had squirreled away enough money to get a family membership to the YMCA. So she took me down there and she pushed me out of the car and said, join something. And I did not want to. But my ride had driven away. And back then, before Title IX, most sports didn't allow girls to join. So my 3 choices were track, which if you're a short, fat little girl, you don't run fast. And swimming, which if you're a fat little girl, you do not want to put on a swimsuit because then you hear all of these comments about whale, right? And now I'm really small, right? Well, I never got any taller, but have not been fat for years. The other thing was judo. The judo instructor had a sister. And I always think I should make up a good lie about I want to be a ninja or that, but no. I walked in and went 3 choices, judo. The judo instructor had a sister, and so he allowed girls to join. Can you believe that? That's how it was back then, right? And she was a black belt, so I was one of the very few women of my age that saw a black belt in front of me on that. And yeah, I was a fat little kid, so I was hard to lift up, and I was really short, so I was hard to get under. And I was from a very disorganized environment, let's just say that politely. So I was used to fighting. And yeah, I was good at it from the get-go. And when I was at school and I beat up another kid, I got suspended. And at judo, I beat up another kid and they gave me a medal. And pretty soon Eventually, I was studying in Japan. I did a year abroad scholarship as part of Washington University in St. Louis. Now, of course, we think of Japan as being someplace very advanced in business. But again, this is over 50 years ago. So I went to the dean of the business school and said, I want to go do a study abroad. And back then, he said, it's people who major in foreign language or humanities, Spanish literature that go study abroad. He said, we've never had anybody in the business school do that. But then he said, there's no reason you can't. You signed off my paperwork and off I went.
Yeah. Math here is the same as math there.
Huh?
Right? There's no reason to travel. So, but what was drawing you into that? Was it the opportunity to get some of the martial arts training over there, or was that like the ride you were looking at, or
it was totally so I could go do judo in Japan. Yeah. I told them they weren't going to pay for that, so I'm like, I want to go study Japanese business, which made me look very forward thinking, right?
Definitely before the rise of the samurai businessman ethic and all that stuff that we dabbled with here in the mid 80s. I'd love to know about And maybe any parallels that you draw between mathematics and judo. Judo's it's a physical activity, but it's also very strategic. And obviously there's physics and all that type of stuff involved. But you started in math and came through sort of the athletics and really achieved at that, and then found your way back to math. Are there any direct lines or threads?
I do think that math is one of the reasons or statistics specifically, that I was successful at judo. And part of the reason my daughter was successful as well, because I coached her when she was little. And this is going to sound really conceited, but I don't care. I was 19 years old when I graduated from Washington University in St. Louis. So I figure I'm smarter than most people, right? Most people don't graduate from college when they're 19. And how can I apply this to judo so that I could win more? And so I started thinking about it strategically, which a lot of people do not. And one of the things I thought about is most people at the time, and probably still, most people won by throwing. So there are 4 ways you can win in judo. You can throw somebody, you can pin them, you can choke them, you can armbar them, or I guess there's a 5th way. You can win on points or penalties. So most people won based on throws. So I thought, if that's where most people are, then it would make sense for me to focus on the network part of it. When I went to Japan, they were very good at throwing. They had a ton of people on the mat. They had a lot of people to train with. But because they had a ton of people on the mat, they didn't practice that transition from throwing to mat work. Because once you threw somebody, you had to get up, because there were a lot of people on the mat, and they would step on you or you get thrown on or whatever. But in a tournament, you do have that transition. And Thorndike's law of transfer, my daughter Rhonda always laughs at me because she's only you would quote somebody's PhD talk about judo. But Thorndike was an educational psychologist who said that the closer skill is practiced in the situation to which it is supposed to be applied, the more transfer will occur. And I was probably the best person in the world. And again, that sounds immodest, but I did win the world championships. And I think I was the best person in the world at that transition. That I beat so many people on the mat, and they knew I was going to go to the mat with them. And why did I do it? Because I had practiced that in that exact situation more than them. Well, if you apply that to software development, didn't think I was going to get there today, or math, so often our mathematics is taught in the sense of what's 7 times 8? Now, I have been working in math for my entire life as an engineer, as a statistician, as a software developer, running multiple businesses. Never in my life has anyone run into my office and said, quick, AnnMaria, what is the standard deviation of 4, 8, 12, and 19? And they ran out before I could answer, right? But that's how we teach math. So much of it is taught in a very disembodied way. And often this is true of programming as well. I used to say, I teach at National University in my spare time. I teach epidemiology and biostatistics and occasionally advanced quantitative data analysis. And first of all, when I first started doing the quantitative data analysis course, this is how, it's amazing they let me out without adult supervision. I looked at what the last professor did, and I told the dean, I'm not doing this. All of these lectures are like mathematical proofs and solving these equations by hand. And this is the 21st century with computers. And I used to say I would never hire anybody right out of graduate school because they didn't know how to do anything. I don't need somebody to prove the central limit theorem for me. I need somebody who can take this set of data and answer a question that one of our clients would have. Like, did this program actually increase the rate of technology transfer from universities to businesses, and how, and by how much? And that's similar to what I did with judo, this is the situation where I need to apply these skills, and I'm going to practice exactly that. If I am creating an educational game, when I interview people for my company, I don't do those stupid Google tests. Show me how to do a bubble sort. No, you can Google that. All right. What I'd say is bring in some code that you've written that you really are excited about or proud of, and walk me through the decisions you made and how you did it. So if that's my specialization for my PhD is applied statistics, and that's how I have gone all the way through. How can I take this information I learned, whether it's how to teach math or how to interest kids, how to make a game and apply it to solve real problems that people have.
That's fantastic. I came up in the early days of you would just get computer labs in school. And so the Oregon Trail and Carmen Sandiego, and there's these really classic games, which I think today still hold up, right? As far as they're story driven, they present a problem, and then they help you find the tools to uncover them. I guess Oregon Trail is a little bit more history-based story, but you play it enough, you start to figure out how things work. Today with educational technology, and I did some early work with Nickelodeon in high school, and one class that I dabbled with was early childhood education. I always thought I would go in that direction. So I've always been fascinated by the state of education and entertainment. Just recorded an interview with somebody where she was talking about the state of educational entertainment as popular media has gone. But with 7th generation games, it's not fluff. Like you say, it's not just an excuse or busy work that a teacher can pull up. You're telling stories, you're getting very deep into even the culture because you target specific communities. I'd love to hear a little bit about the founding of that, the mission, and some of the decisions that you've made about the development for these games.
Well, I wanted to do this for decades. And in fact, what happened was eventually the hardware caught up with me. So many years ago, when I was in grad school, I was teaching children who were emotionally disturbed. In high school, middle school students, gangbangers who had been expelled from their previous school and sent to a special school where I taught. And many of these kids had severe psychological, emotional problems. They had been beaten by their parents in terrible ways. They just really, if you had been raised that way, it would be amazing that you would be normal, so to speak. And I was teaching math. Mm-hmm. When the psychologists are working with these kids, I realize you're in the 8th grade and you're doing 4th grade math. Even if they get you to the point where you're not cussing people out and trying to beat up your boss, you have no real skills. Like, how are you ever going to get a job? So I thought, if I could create a computer program that could teach the kids math, so remove that authority figure they're rebelling against, and then they could get ahead academically, when they finally solve their other issues, they would actually be in a position where they could go out and get a job and have a good life, which is what I wanted for them. But if you think about it, in the 1980s, this text-based stuff, the very first Mac computer, so there wasn't a lot I could do. I did some text-based games, and I graduated my PhD that I did on educational testing and went off and did other things. So there are 2 types of people who would be good tech entrepreneurs, and I think we underestimate the second type. You need to take a risk, right? You need to maybe go years without adequate income because you have to make this game, and so the whole time you're making it, nobody's paying you. And then once you made it, if it's an educational game, you have to test it and see that it actually teaches kids something. So again, nobody's paying you. So there's a 2 or 3 year gap there maybe. And maybe you'll never make money. So 2 kinds of people can afford to do this. One, young people who are still in school, living with their parents or living with a bunch of roommates and have very low expenses. And the other is people who have saved up some money and their kids are gone. I tell you what, when I made that last college tuition payment, I felt like I won the lottery. So my kids had gotten older. We had the first 3 were out of the house and on their own. My youngest daughter is much younger than the other 3, but we had saved up enough for her college tuition. She got a scholarship to a college prep high school, so we could take the risk. And a friend of mine that I co-founded Spirit Consulting with, Eric Lange, we went to Washington, D.C. We analyzed the National Indian Education Study. And this is data on every Alaska Indian or Native American child in the school system. And what we found was that the more kids learned about their native culture and language, the worse they did in school. I know, I made the same face as you. This surprised me. Now, Eric, who was my co-researcher on this study, is from the Spirit Lake Nation. He's the first member of the Spirit Lake Nation to earn a doctorate. He had been maybe school board president, but I was on the school board there. He'd been a teacher there, tribal college president. So he knew Native American education from the ground up, as well as having attended reservation schools and having kids and grandkids. And he said to me, come on, you're a statistician, you're good at math, look at it. If you have 6 hours in a school day and you take an hour out of the day to teach, say, Dakota language, and then you take another half hour of the day to teach Dakota history, now you have 4.5 hours in the school day. Mm. And where do you think the hour and a half is coming from? And he said, with a lot of elementary teachers, math and science are their least favorite subjects. And he goes, mostly math. So it's coming out of math. So we're in DC, we're here in a cab back to the airport. And he looks at me and he says, I'm not going to accept this. That my kids or my grandkids and my grandkids, that they won't learn their culture, they learn math. We have to come up with something. Well, and at the time I was working for a consulting company, making bank, doing what you do, driving up and down the 405 to offices and working at a cubicle. And Eric calls me up one day and he says, I know you. You don't want to spend your life driving up and down the freeway and working inside of a box. Let's start a company here on the reservation so we can employ people so my relatives don't have to make the choice between using their education and living within their culture. And I said, well, what kind of company would we make? And he said, well, you come up with something. So I said, well, you had this idea about educational games way back when. So it all converged. Yeah. And when we started the company, we needed somebody to do the accounting and stuff like that. So Eric's sister, April, at the time, was the controller for the tribe. She's an accountant. So we offered her 10% of the company to be our accountant. And then we signed our incorporation papers in the tribal administration building. And I wrote a check because I was the only one of the three of us that had $150 in the bank account at the time. And I said, we're going to make $1 million. And April laughed and Eric said, yeah, it'd be nice. Within 22 months, we had $1 million in the business.
Wow. And that was the first venture. You've got several after that?
That was Spirit Lake Consulting. So we did statistical evaluations. We also did what I used to call slices of the internet. Back when half the country had internet, the other half didn't. That's how math works, right? So we would go to these remote rural places that didn't have internet and provide training. You wanted training on caring for people with chronic illness and disease. Say, taking care of people who are diabetic, taking care of people who are bedbound. You're in a small community, you don't have a lot of people, you're getting whoever you can get, and they need to be trained how to do a transfer from the bed to a chair, to a wheelchair, how to follow a behavior plan for a child who has severe emotional problems and so forth. We would go to all these various organizations that had websites, that had materials, PDFs, and say, hey, would you like us to share your information around the country? And if they said yes, go with God, we would put it on a CD. We would go into places like the tribal college that had a computer lab. Often the people in the workshop had touched a computer before in their life, show them how to use a computer, how to put in the CD. And sometimes they had internet access, like AOL version of dial-up internet. So we might have some links that you could go to are purely text-based. And yeah, so that's what we did. That was our first thing, selling slices of the internet. Then we moved to doing online courses. I taught the first online course ever for tribal college. We did those as static web pages. And then we moved with the technology. Then when it got possible to make educational games, the first games we made were for Mac and Windows, because this is before Chromebook existed.
Right.
And then, of course, half the schools went to Chromebooks, and we had to port to making things to be playable online. So we went from Spirit Lake Consulting, and then the sad thing that happened is, well, the not sad thing that happened is April got a job as general manager of the casino. So she had to sell her share. You cannot have anybody. Casinos are very strict on other other interests for reasons, right? Then Eric got cancer, and he was given 5 years to live. He just passed away. Actually, he lived 15 years. He got into a clinical trial, but at the time he said, if I only got 5 years left to live, I want to spend it going to powwows and spend it with my grandchildren. So he sold his share of the company to me, and then it was just me owning the whole company. And it couldn't be called Spirit Lake Consulting because I'm not a member of the Spirit Lake Nation. April and Eric were, so when we started, it was the majority. So I'm coming back from one of these things in DC, and my little daughter is in the back seat in her car seat, I'm talking to my husband. We're trying to come up with a name for the new company, and it's going to be Eric's going to take the training contracts, and I was going to take all the data evaluation, software development, because that's my thing. And we're joking about not being able to come up with a name for the company, and we ask our little daughter in the back seat. Dennis says, "Hey, Mom needs a name for a new company. What do you think she ought to call it?" And she says, "She should name it after me." So we named it the Julia Group. So that was my second company. Focused. And then I'm cute as Julia. So the second company was just data analysis, evaluation. You got a grant for $2 million to reduce alcoholism in Lansing, Michigan. Mm-hmm. At the end of 5 years, you don't get to write to the state of Michigan or the federal government and say, "I did well, send me $3 million this time." Somebody has to put together a research plan to see if you really did that or not. Hopefully somebody from outside your area that has no conflict of interest. So that's what I did for years. And then if you also wanted some online courses developed or something, basically our tagline to this day says, if it touches a number, we do it. I think Eric still got this idea that he wanted to do games. And so then we came up with 7th Generation Games, and we wanted to do something that was pretty different than the data analysis, purely data analysis I was doing. It went together because the first contracts we got were to do research on if these games really work. So the data analysis part of it, the collecting data on every single thing, what makes kids play. Well, the problem with most educational games is that they are either bad education or they are bad games.
Right.
So you have a lot of education, quote unquote, educational games that don't teach anything. The ones that drive me insane are the coding games. I have 9 grandkids, and 3 of them are under 5, but the other 6 are in various stages of elementary through high school. And in elementary school, I'm learning coding. I said, "Great. What language are you learning?" And one of them said English. This is coding because it has if-then statements. If they do this, no. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's coding. I was at an alternative school once. My sweet spot is kids who don't want to learn math, which is most of them.
Right.
To be honest. So people say, "What do we need to do? Kids can go to the content." Are you kidding me? I go around this country to schools, and I will tell you that no matter what school it is, unless it's a very expensive private school with very affluent kids whose parents are super involved, the vast majority of schools, anywhere from 10 to 50% of kids in a math class are turning in their worksheets with nothing on but their name. They're just not doing it. And I don't care how great of a teacher you are. And at many schools, I'd say the average is probably 25%. They just aren't doing it. And what I tell kids, whether it's in Judo, whether it's in math, whether it's in game design classes, you can screw your life up in one of 2 ways. You can really screw up, you knock over a liquor store and you get sent up for 7 years. You're drunk and you run over a lady with a baby in a stroller and you kill her baby. So you do horrible, stupid things. Or you can screw it up by small decisions every day. And one of those small decisions every day is you just don't do your schoolwork. And by the time you're in 10th grade, you're at the 4th grade level. Then we take these kids off and we put them in remedial math and we give them a worksheet packet because it's easier for the school, it's easier for the teachers. You give them a packet of worksheets, which they then don't do. If you think that these kids are going to do content, they don't do their schoolwork when their teacher is standing there right in front of them. You think they're going to do it for some disembodied hand writing on a computer? People like me will do it. Like I do all kinds of LinkedIn learning courses because I'm super interested in AI and super interested in large language models and super interested in tons of things. But the average kid's not going to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm in this alternative school and they're saying, "Oh, you make educational games. This is an educational game our kids are doing." This is maybe a 9th or 10th grader who is very behind in math. So I'm not making this up. They're on this computer and there's an alien. And then a thing comes up and it says, "What is 7 times 9? And the kid types in 63 and the alien hits a golf ball that like shoots out. And then it comes up and it says, "What is 9 times 4? And the kid types in 36 and the alien hits the golf ball." And I watched this for a bit and this is not one of my more prized professional minutes. It just comes out of me. So that looks boring as fuck. And the kid says it is. So that is education. It is going over your multiplication tables, but it's not very good education. It's not very good game. Then you have, like I said, the coding ones where move the turtle. See, if you clicked here, the turtle moved there. So you learn coding, or a lot of shooting and games, they're called. Like shooting and spelling, shoot the correctly spelled word. And that's not bad. Those things are not bad for young kids. There's a certain amount of repetition you need, but you need to go beyond that. So what we do, so then a lot of, I don't want to diss anybody because some of these we've done white label games under contract for, but some of these companies, they're looking at how much kids play the game, right? So they will have games that have relatively little education in them, where you go through this whole narrative and at the end of it, there might be a math question. Or there's a lot of, like I said, the shooting and things. If you get this math question right, then you cast a spell, and that does something to the zombie that you're trying to kill. So again, that's not bad. It's basically an electronic version of flashcards. And I don't know about you, but I think most of us used flashcards when our kids were little to teach them their multiplication tables and their math facts. But after a certain point, you need to go beyond that. And those games, here's the kicker, those games are very expensive to make. The games like Spirit Lake, Fish Lake are very expensive to make, because for everything that you do in a good game, you need to have, plus everything you do in good education. So, for example, let's start with making Count Navajo. For 7th graders, it's teaching ratio and proportion. That's what they learn in 7th grade. How do you make that interesting to Navajo kids who are very interested in sheep ranching? Well, one of the things about sheep ranching, we had Christy Hansen from the Navajo Nation was our game designer on this. Christy knows more about sheep than any person I've ever met. And she'll say, well, I don't know very much about sheep. And then she'll go on to 50 different kinds of sheep and the different kinds of wool. I'm like, dude, someday I gotta meet somebody that you think knows a lot about sheep. So one of the things about sheep is where you really make your money is selling the lambs. I thought you make it from wool, you make some money, but where you end up with the profit is from lambs. And the better managed your flock is, the better fed they are, the better cared for they are, the higher the proportion of twin lambs. So obviously, if you are giving birth to twin lambs, that's twice as much as if you're having single ones. So this farm has 12 ewes and 6 of them give birth to twins. This farm, or ranch I guess it's called, has 21 and 7 of them give birth to ewes. Now, is this farm better because they had 7 and this one had 6? No, because this one is a 1-to-3 ratio, this one's a 1-to-2 ratio. But then when you get that right, if you get some of those problems right, then there's a game where you have to go and you catch the lambs and bottle feed them.
Right.
So they're tied together, but not always so intricately. Or blue corn mush. It's kind of thing that people would make on the Navajo Nation. And so there's a little visual novel, and this girl is saying, yeah, both my grandmothers have blue corn mush recipes. And when one of them says, which one do you like better? I say, yours, of course. And here's my one grandmother's recipe, and I'm going to use this. It's for 12 people, but I only have 4 people coming over. Let me know what the recipe is. And so it's actually applied in ways that kids can see they can use it in their life.
Wow. And at the same time, you're tackling some of the cultural exposure, and you're showing the kids people that look like them and stories that relate to them. That is so really you went back to that initial original problem, and you've almost doubled the time, what you've invented as a time machine.
That is exactly it. So after the pandemic, right, my brother teaches math, and he says to me, AnnMaria, they're telling us we need to bring up the kids for a year and a half, 2 years every year to compensate for this pandemic learning loss. He said, if I could bring every kid up 2 years in grade level in math in a year, I would have been doing that my entire career. I wouldn't wait for a pandemic to do it. So how do you do it? And the answer is exactly what you said. If you can teach math in history class, if you can teach math in music class, we have a game, All That Jazz Math, where it, again, looks at ratios and looks at the number of beats per note, right? An eighth note, a quarter note, and so on. And it's in music class. If you can teach math in music class, in history class, then, oh my gosh, one of my favorite activities is math and PE. I love this. And this was in Chile, where it gets really hot in the summer sometimes. And they were having classes in some summer school camp for kids. We do an augmented reality app. You can get it on the App Store or Google Play for teaching just your basic math skills in English or Spanish. So you can click on the card and it will tell you either in English or in Spanish what it is. Like 3 times 5 is 15. So what they did is they took the little cards that you have to hold the phone over and they hid them all around the school. And the kids had so many, because they were doing it indoors because it was so hot outside. And so the kids had like 15 minutes to run all the way around the school. So they had a worksheet that run all the way around the school, find all the cards, hold the phone over it, get the right answer, and then fill it out. So there's another one with, we just did this game funded with the Library of Congress. And I should mention that anybody who's listening, if they would like to design games for us, we have another cohort coming up. This will be our third and last one in this grant that's funded through the Library of Congress Teaching Primary Sources. And we get with groups of educators and people in the community who are interested in designing a game. And we come up with a game design, and then we make it. And so the first one we did was on Native American veterans. And there's a whole lesson plan they did about this veteran, Joseph Oklahoma, who was the most decorated Native American during World War I. And one of the things he did was run through like 220 yards under fire, jumped into a machine gun nest, took the Germans' machine gun, turned it on them, took them over. Then the group of 23 soldiers who were following him, they took over another machine gun nest. And between them, these 24 guys captured 171 German soldiers and killed 78.
Ooh.
So in PE class, so they did this as a whole project. In PE class, they have to run 220 yards with a backpack on them and jump over obstacles like they would have. And then in math class, they're doing a ratio, like what's the ratio of the number of people they captured compared to the number of soldiers there were, and what's the ratio of the total they captured and killed compared to the soldiers they were. And in English class, they're writing, and this is an actual thing, because people are trying to get Joseph Oklahoma, I think it's Congressional Medal of Honor posthumously, which is not often done, but is sometimes done. And so then the students write up a letter justifying this based on what they've seen about the ratios and that. So those kind of things are real life applications. And if you're a Native American kid, especially if you're Choctaw, which is what Oklahoma was, but even if you're not, even if you're a Native Dakota kid from North Dakota, you look at this and think, hey, that's right. That guy should get recognized.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that we're doing. The new one we're doing now is on Lewis and Clark Expedition from multiple perspectives. And having worked on reservations for decades, when the teacher said they want to do, well, it's not just teacher, when people said they want to do Lewis and Clark, I was like, I don't know about that. But they wanted to do like one from Lewis's perspective as the person who is discovering all these new plants and animals and writing about them. One from Clark's perspective, who's the cartographer. One from Sacagawea's perspective. One from the Hidatsa, like I'm here farming, right? The Hidatsa were massively successful farmers. I'm here raising my corn and beans, squash, and these guys show up. One from the Dakota perspective on the medicinal plants they used, and yeah, this woman, Sacagawea, she was really sick and they didn't know what to do. And I said, well, this is what we use. And anyway, so that's what we're doing now. And the third cohort starts April 25th. People can come in person. It will be right before the Minot State Powwow. So we're doing a workshop, and then right after that, we go to the grand entry. Anybody can come to the powwow. So that's what we're doing. We can cover their lodging up in North Dakota for the night. We can cover part of their expenses to drive up there or fly up there. If anybody's interested in doing it and being part of it. And then the rest of the workshop, there's 3 of them. The rest of them are online. And if they can't make it to North Dakota, they really want to do it. Like one of the people in the current cohort is from Hawaii. And we're doing a second mini game with him, which is about his great something grandfather who was Cherokee, who hopped on a whaling scooter and traveled to Hawaii and met a native Hawaiian woman and married her and became a fairly successful, I don't know, quite a shipping magnate, but owned a whaling ship. So we think of Native Americans as the people who were being met with by the explorers and not the people who were the explorers. So yeah, always lots of things happening. And I haven't even told you the newest thing we're doing.
It's just so cool how when I first saw it, I was like, oh, they're math games. That's interesting. But the multi-layers, and I think that's what makes this so interesting is from a technical communication standpoint. And again, I work with a lot of professional businesses and B2B startups and things like that. And they always seem to be stuck in the nuts and bolts. I've got this pyramid concept. I stole it from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but he stole it from the Blackfeet Native Americans anyway, so I don't feel so bad about stealing it back. That they're all stuck down here in the nuts and bolts, and they don't ever make the connections to bigger ideas and the stories and those emotional appeals. And it takes a lot of work to make these games, as you said, but it doesn't take a whole lot to make the connections if you have your eyes open to it.
And the thing about it taking a whole lot of work to make games, that's the new thing we're working on. So first of all, anybody who's listening wants us to make a game for them. That's generally what we do. Schools have very little money. A lot of people have gone broke trying to sell schools. What we generally do is we look at a contract with someone like the Library of Congress or the Thunder Valley Education Cooperative at Pine Ridge, some organization that wants us. We're doing one with Dream and Green right now out of Miami, Florida, to do games on cleaning the environment. So pretty excited about that. So we will work with an organization who wants us to make a game. We will make the game, and then they use it to teach whatever it is they want to teach out in the world. So one reason is working with a lot of indigenous nations, I'm never going to be that person that's making gaming in Dakota and then selling it back to Dakota. That's just not going to be me. But if the Dakota want a game, I will give them a better price than anybody can get to make a game, and then they can use it to teach their language. So that's what we do. Like I said, we're doing one for Dream and two for Dream and Green now. We're doing 3 for the Library of Congress. So if somebody has an idea that you want to teach anything to anybody, just you hit me up. That the other thing, so years ago, this really wonderful woman I know, Melissa, invited me to the Upper Nicola Valley in British Columbia. She's First Nations. So to get the Upper Nicola Valley, you fly into Edmond, Alberta. Then you fly to Kamloops. And Melissa picks you up and drives you 3.5 hours to Upper Nicola Valley. And it's very beautiful. So I'm speaking at this conference on how we can use games to teach Indigenous languages and to maintain Indigenous languages. Christy Hansen, again, has this beautiful quote. She's Navajo, and she said, "Our language will not survive unless our children use it while they're playing." And so Melissa says to me, "Can you wait after the conference? Because these people from way up north want to speak with you." And I'm thinking, dude, I took 2 planes and drove 3.5 hours to get to you were way up north. But anyway, they come in, these people teach their Indigenous language, and they wanted a game on it, but they're from a community of like 2,000 people. And initially, when we started making games, it would take about 8 months, 3 developers to make Spirit Lake or Fish Lake. And you can still find them on the Microsoft Store or on the App Store. Now we've gone more towards Chromebook games, but it would take us like 3 developers, 8 months. And you just cannot do that for a community of 2,000 people. It's not cost effective. And I felt bad about it. And I thought about this for a very long time. And over the years, we have worked on making it easier to make games. So we have 2 things. One's available right now. Anybody listening, if they want to send me an email, I will hook them up. We have a game builder where if you've had 1 class in JavaScript, maybe even not any, if you know a little bit about object-oriented programming, you can make educational games. We set it up that it's set up in blocks. You want a visual novel, you go in here and you type in the line of text that you want on it. You click here, the image you want on it. If you want a voiceover, you record the voiceover and you click the link here. So we've been able to reduce down from 3 developers taking 8 months, 1 developer can do it in 6 weeks.
Wow.
And it doesn't have to be, now it can't be an 8-year-old kid that took a coding class, quote unquote. And what I always tell people is if you want to figure out if the intern or the person in your community, your office has the adequate technical skills to do this, ask them what IDE they use. And if they give you any answer other than what's an IDE, they can do it. You could do it without an IDE, but it would just be way more difficult. But yeah, you go and you download files, you unzip them, you make a copy, and you go in your ID and you start just typing in thing and linking images. And it even counts. We have a lot of artwork. We're working on putting it more organized. So that's done. You can have it today. The other thing that we're working on at this moment is a game builder that you don't need to know any coding. Basically WordPress for educational games. And that we expect to be done. We have a prototype that's very skeletal, so anybody who wants to can play with that. But we expect to have a fairly good MVP in the next 3 months.
Wow. And that is going to change so many businesses and so many teachers and communities. I think experiential games is really, they say video is taking over, and video is very passive. I'll admit I'm stuck in TikTok for several hours a day. But I'm reading the news, right? That's how I play it off. But it's very passive, and but giving something that somebody can interact with. I have my cards that I use in my workshop. I will hit you up to test this out, because maybe I can build something. Great. I can build something with my cards to put it more in people's digital hands.
That'd be super cool.
The experience, I think, is what changes. Reflecting somebody else's lived experience, showing someone another possibility, or letting them get their hands in and do it for themselves. I'm going to stick my nose in here just a second before we get back to this conversation with a really exciting announcement. My book, Be a Nerd That Talks Good, will be coming out in the next couple of months. It's finally gone to copy edit and design and layout. And so what I need now is people in my book army. If you're interested in reading the book, getting an early copy of it, let me know. Please go to nerdthattalksgood.com/book and sign up, and I will be in touch. All that I ask for you is that when the book launches, you prepare an amazing review. There will be some special treats and some special offers for people who buy the book. So stay tuned. Again, that's nerdthattalksgood.com/book. And back to this amazing conversation with AnnMaria. You've reinvented yourself so many times. You've got your hands in so many incredible, rich pots. Do you do non-work? Do you have the thing that keeps you fresh or keeps you invigorated? Or are you the type of person that work is play and play is work, and there's no line between the two?
My children often joke about my idea of vacation as a laptop with a view. And they've also often said that if I ever write my autobiography, the title will be I Was Out of Town at the Time, because so many of my stories start that way. Well, Maria, she hurt her knee during the state track finals. Well, I was out of town at the time, but I travel a lot. I was part of Startup Chile. Anybody's interested in Startup Chile, so totally recommend it. It was a great experience. I was there for a year. I have worked in Chile and the Dominican Republic and the Bahamas on a cruise. So I travel a lot, but because I have a job where I can work anywhere, I take my laptop with me and do work anywhere. I think that is my secret to not being stressed too. These days you see a lot of people get upset about, oh, I had to wait at Starbucks or my flight was delayed. No, I have a MacBook, I have an iPad with a keyboard, I have my phone, and wherever I am, if I'm delayed, I can go to corner and work. So I don't really, that's a thing I have struggled with. Now I have 4 kids and 9 grandkids, so I do spend time with my family. But when I have talked about retirement, I don't know what I would do. I did judo. I taught judo for 50 years. And now I don't teach so much. I think at some point you need to step out and let the younger people do it. And I've done a lot of those things that people do in retirement, right? Like for the last 30 years, I was professor full-time for 7 years. I was associate professor, and I left the year I would have become full professor. Instead, I bounced to California and started a company. So I was professor, and then for the last 20 plus years, I've been an adjunct professor at Loyola Marymount and Pepperdine and now National University. So I've done that. I published a lot of scientific articles. I published a book on judo called Winning on the Ground. So I've done a lot of those things that people do in retirement. Mm-hmm. I was president of the National Judo Organization. I was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom to the California State Athletic Commission, so I'm on that now. So a lot of that stuff people do in their retirement I've already done. Well, that's probably why I haven't retired. I have no idea what I would do.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm gonna learn to knit.
I've heard a lot of people say the secret to staying young is starting retirement early and just having little pieces of it while you keep yourself going and active. And yeah, my dad retired from the Air Force after 37 years, and my mom said he roamed the house like a caged animal until he discovered woodworking. That's his big hobby, and fly fishing now. So those two are available to you if you're looking for something else.
One of my friends commented, if you're retired, maybe what you could do is just not have the meetings with clients and not have to fill out the reports to agencies, and you could just work on games that you're interested in.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. All of my interests are not so much like the embroidery type or fly fishing. I'm very interested in AI. Google has this Google Startup School, so I've taken a couple of courses in that. I'm always trying to build up my programming skills. I am always looking at more things that we could do right now I'm just starting a YouTube channel for our 7gen blocks, the game builder for developers, because that's going to be key. So yeah, there's just so many things around programming and education, math education, interested in. And every year I say I'm going to do less. Like I always say, I'm not going to teach epidemiology again this year, but then somehow I do.
Well, I will certainly include links to the company and any other to the YouTube channel. Get some people watching that and people who want to reach out to you. How else can people keep tabs on you or connect? What's the best way?
Well, I've been cutting down on my social media because a lot of it's just people hollering at each other. So LinkedIn, really, you'll find me on LinkedIn or Blue Sky. Pretty much only those two places. I do have an Instagram account that I'm at sometimes. That is mostly things of boxing, MMA fights where they're a part of the commission, or my lovely children. But anything about our company you'll find on LinkedIn or our company website, 7generationgames.com. And there's also growingmath.org, which is where we have a bunch of lessons on teaching math. I've been basic teacher. Yeah.
Well, I am excited to see what is coming out next, because I mean, like you say, you always say you want to do something less, but then something. It's shiny object syndrome. I know I have the same thing. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. I don't know what to say. I'm excited to start learning some math stuff, and I don't say that very lightly. So I will play.
I want to see what game you're going to come up with.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that. And I mentioned before, I have several people that I already know I'm going to introduce you to. The Venn diagrams just keep getting closer and closer. So thank you for joining.
Well, it was nice to talk with you. I'll be at GDC and ASU GSB and TEDx Fargo. So all those things are coming up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Talk to you later.